Hi, I'm Jim Spohrer, the director of IBM's Cognitive Open Tech Group, and I would like to share my uh, screen with you and my presentation today. So today's talk is the future of service science in the era of AI. I'm Jim Spohrer, director of IBM's Cognitive Open Tech Group, and if you have questions after the question and answer session, you can contact me on Twitter, LinkedIn, or Slack via these connections. I also post my slides to SlideShare, and I'd like to thank Fu-Ren Lin for the invitation to present to the International Conference of Service Science and Innovation today. There's a lot of questions about the future of service science in the era of AI, and I'll try to share some perspective and frameworks that might allow one to take an approach to answering some of these questions. Again, this is my brief bio, and in addition to working at IBM, I'm one of the founders of the field of service science, and I'd like to thank Fu-Ren Lin for all his support for service science at the Hicks Conference and other places. So thank you, Fu-Ren, for the invitation and all your support of service science. I've won a number of awards in service science, from the Gummison Service Research Award, Fargo Lush Service Dominant Logic Award, the Daniel Berg Service Systems Award, and I'm also a PICMET Fellow for Advancing Service Science. Through my career at MIT, studying physics, artificial intelligence, and cognitive science at Yale, and studying service systems at IBM, I've gained an appreciation for many different types of systems and their complexity. I got interested in service because of the revenue growth at IBM in service, and you can see from about the 1990s, service has become an increasing part of IBM's revenue. I joined IBM right about here and helped formulate service science to increase our innovation in service systems. This is a brief outline of the talk today, and I'm going to give some context, and I'm going to present some material about artificial intelligence as well as service science. You can think of artificial intelligence as a relatively mature discipline. It's about 70 years old. It deals with automation. You can think of service science as a much more emerging transdiscipline. It's not yet 20 years old. And the focus in service science is really about transformation of service systems. When you think about disciplines, it's really important, whether the discipline is computer science, chemistry, AI, biology, or service science, to understand what type of entities are being studied. And these entities are very, very important because not only are you interested in entities, but you're also interested in the interactions between the entities. For example, this is a paper by Newell and Simon when they were accepting their Turing Award, and they were talking about computer science, building computer science to serve society, and they were talking about the basic level abstraction of the symbol and how important it was to understand computers as physical symbol systems. Your smartphone, your laptop, all of them are physical symbol systems for processing symbols, typically in binary. Brian Arthur is an economist, and I think a lot of his writing recently has been about technology and how it's evolving, and especially what kind of impact artificial intelligence is going to have on the economy. And he talks about the Keynesian point where society using advanced technologies has enough, it can produce enough to satisfy the needs of all the members of the society, but is it well distributed, and how do people get access? For hundreds of years, we've accessed the benefits of society by having jobs, but in the future, Brian brings up the point, if there's technological unemployment, if automation goes to the levels AI can take it to, how will people get access to the benefits? And this is a perfect setup for service science, because it shows that you can solve the technological problem, solve all the technological problems, build a technology that can do everything and maybe more than people can do, but still you haven't solved the problems of society. That requires something different. And And it's not about automation, it's about transformation of entities, it's transformation of our value propositions and how we interact. This topic recently came up of redistribution of wealth. That's one way to give access, is just redistribute it. And in Bloomberg's Intelligence Squared, that's debatable. Not only did they have a great set of panelists debating, is it time to redistribute wealth, but 3,500 arguments were collected by IBM Watson, our debater technology, and it created a summary of the arguments for and against. So this just shows you the advances in AI are getting very, very good for crowdsourcing and summarizing arguments that people are making. This is a concise description of service science on one slide. It's from a paper I wrote on looking at Vargo and Lush concepts of generic actors and markets. And I'll just say that, the way to think about service science, first of all, is a transdiscipline that's incorporating many different disciplines, but we have very clear types of entities, service system entities. Some people call them socio-technical systems. It can be a person, a business, a university, a nation. There's service system entities at many different scales. But what's interesting is viewing them in an ecology of interacting service systems and what kind of outcomes they create. So again, if some people want to call them socio-technical systems, that's fine. I think socio-technical system is kind of about what's inside it. There's people, there's technology. And what service science tries to get at is not only the interactions, the value propositions that connect the entities, but how that evolves new value co-creation mechanisms, new co-elevation capability co-elevation mechanisms over time. So it's the evolution and the interaction that service system emphasizes versus socio-technical system, which is just what's inside. I'm not going to go through this in a great deal of detail, but I'll just, we'll post these slides to SlideShare, and you can see there's many different publications examining the types of entities that we study in service science. And more the service research community is starting to publish about artificial intelligence. And I think in broad strokes, what we're seeing, if you look at organizations and individuals and what's changing and what's staying constant, through three different eras of humanity, the hunter-gatherer agricultural age, where the organization unit was really the family or the clan, and successful people were generalists. They knew how to start a fire. They knew how to build tools. They could make their own clothes. I mean, if you think about the amount of stuff that we just go out and buy that they had to build themselves, it's clear, they were generalists to survive. But still, in order to be successful, they had to compete for collaborators. In the manufacturing, the human service era that we're in today, more of the focus is on service system entities like business and nations. And to be successful, you specialize. You get a degree in computer science or data science or operations research. And that specialization, the deeper you can go, that's where you can get a great advantage. But you still have to compete for collaborators if you want to do big things. And the AI era that's coming, especially in COVID era, families are moving back in together. But it's not just the nations and businesses. We're part of a cyber global community and virtual worlds, so you can think of that. And to be successful, you have to have a certain amount of breadth and you have to have a certain amount of depth. And increasingly, you're going to be using artificial intelligence to augment yourself. But still, the thing that's constant is to be successful. If you want to do bigger and bigger things, you have to compete for collaborators. So you see this in platforms competing to get people into their ecosystems. And that seems to be the constant as we look at the roadmap for the future of service science and value co-creation and capability co-elevation. So let's shift gears. Let's start talking about artificial intelligence. And here are some questions that I think are really important to answer about artificial intelligence. Probably the most important one for a CEO or an entrepreneur is, when can I buy an AI capability X for a particular price Y? So let's explore this a little bit. First of all, there's a huge amount of investment going into artificial intelligence. If you look at IBM alone, we've invested in just one university, MIT, $240 million over 10 years to work on artificial intelligence together. And if you'd like to read more about the future of AI, I'd really recommend Pedro Domingo's book, The Master Algorithm. It's accessible to C-level executives and just people in general. This is Dharminder Modi. He's working on the IBM brain chip, the neuromorphic brain chip. It's been published about on the front cover of Science and in Science magazine. And think about energy levels of computing 10,000 times lower than conventional computers. And that's the problem Dharminder is working on. IBM's, besides investing in the brain chip area, we're also investing heavily in quantum computing. This is another way we can get the cost of computation down. Certain types of problems we can do exponentially faster on quantum computers. Now, it's clear artificial intelligence is getting very, very good at some tasks like captioning pictures, person playing the guitar, man working on the road. But clearly, we're much better. I mean, take a look at this. Okay, this is a furry teacup, spoon, and saucer, but AI systems without a lot of training data, say things like teddy bear, clearly getting it wrong. So we have a lot of experience, we have a lot of data that we accumulate, ability to do generalizations that even the most advanced types of AI systems don't have today. Now, when will they have those capabilities? That's one of the things we're going to explore in this talk. So when we think about artificial intelligence, we're really in the era of narrow artificial intelligence. If you have enough data, you can build things that do speech recognition, image recognition. We're beginning to get into the broad AI area where you can have one AI model that may be able to do, text summarization, question answering, a number of different tasks around text, or images. But still, we're really at the beginning of broad AI, and we're still decades away by most people's consensus from having artificial general intelligence. That's 2050 and beyond. Now, let's get back to energy for a minute. So think about Summit. Summit is the largest supercomputer in the world, and you can measure it's an AI computer. You can measure its performance at 200 petaflops, which is 200 million billion instructions per second. It's big. It consumes 13 megawatts of power, huge amount of power, big, and it can do 200 million billion instructions per second. That's a lot. But now think about the human brain. The human brain does an exascale, 5 times more computing than Summit, 1 billion instructions per second, and it does it only at 20 watts, not megawatts, 20 watts, hundreds of thousands of times less energy. So clearly, just in terms of being able to do massive amounts of computation at low energy, we're nowhere near the capability of people. And here's a little snapshot. You can think about artificial intelligence as, what can a computer do? Certainly, even in the 1950s, computers could do calculations at superhuman, much faster, much more accurate than people. Human level performance is not perfect. It's about 5% error rate. And today we've got systems that are, you give them enough training data, they're able to do speech recognition, image recognition, language translation, even driverless vehicles in certain contexts. We have human level performance, which is about 5% error rate. But think about how we communicate in speech. Chatbots just aren't this fluent natural language communication that we can do. Video understanding, nope, computers aren't as good as people. And no system has a memory like our human memory system for answering general questions and doing generalizations. And common sense reasoning is still not something that computers do. So how can we get a sense of when we will have a solution to artificial general intelligence? Well, one way of doing it is to think about Moore's law. So everything to the left of 2020 is history, and everything to the right is prediction. But let's take a look at this. This is, I guess, my version of Moore's law. If we go 1960, 1980, every 10 years we go out to 2080 and draw a vertical line, and then we have $1, $1,000, $1 million, $1 billion, and $1 trillion. Oops, I went ahead. We can see that as the horizontal lines, in the 1960s, computers could do about 1,000 instructions per second. Today, for $1,000, you can buy a terascale, which is a million instructions per second. But we don't get it to an exascale at $1,000, a billion instructions per second, the computing power of our brain, until about 2060. Summit, again, is 200 petascale, costs tens to hundreds of millions of dollars for that computer. But if Moore's law continues, we can see that, getting to exascale about 2060, nobody can really predict the future, but this is if the pattern continues, we can see that the cost of a digital worker goes down. What is a digital worker? Well, think about the apps on your smartphone. You probably have 100 of them for entertainment, finance, healthcare, education, and each of these apps on your smartphone is going to grow up. It's going to have a fluent conversation ability. It's going to have an episodic memory, so it can remember the last time it interacted with you. It's going to have more and more of these human-like capabilities for interaction, and that's what a digital worker is. Your apps are going to grow up. They're going to be digital workers. By around 2060, who knows? You might have 100 digital workers working for you. And if you're an entrepreneur or a CEO of a company, this is helping you begin to predict when you're going to get a particular capability at a time. It's very exciting because the GDP per employee is going to go up as well. So if you're a CEO or you're an entrepreneur, you're thinking about each person I hire is going to have 50, 10, 50, 100 digital workers working for them. So you're going to expect a lot more out of your augmented labor force. Another way we get to this idea of, when will we have artificial general intelligence is by looking at leaderboards. And leaderboards are just a ranking of who's got an AI capability that's best in a particular area. And this is a roadmap for AI progress. Over here on the left, you can see pattern recognition, speech, images, language translation. Video understanding is a bit harder. Developing cognition, memory, reasoning, common sense reasoning, human-like memory, we don't have that yet. But we are building AI systems that work on particular tasks in these domains: social interaction, fluent conversation, building relationships. And then I think eventually what we would all like is AI that can fill roles, be our assistant, collaborator, coach, mediator. Certainly if you're an entrepreneur or CEO, you're looking forward to that. And what you can do is look at the performance levels on the leaderboards, and paperswithcode.com/SOTA. This is a great website you can go to see what the state of the art, SOTA stands for state of the art, is performance on these leaderboards. And you can see over here, performance is very high. Over here, performance is very low. It's getting better, but if you plot this over a few years like we do at IBM, you can start to get a trajectory. You can start to get a feel that probably around 2040, we'll have these cognitive mediators. So that's confirming evidence. In addition to the computing power, energy cost, you can look at leaderboards to get a sense of what the roadmap is. Now, who's winning? Well, China, certainly in publications. And this is a report that came out of Technology Review at the time it was published. Microsoft was #1 in AI publications, with Google catching up. Now Google has surpassed Microsoft, and IBM solidly in third place on scientific publications. But if you look at patents, IBM dominates over here. We've been #1 in patents for about 28 years in a row. And you should also look at other factors like industrial robots by country. You should also look at, there's studies coming out from various groups looking at how the public policy in a country helps you transition to an AI-driven economy. Accenture has some nice reports you can look at about different countries and how AI-driven economies can affect their GDP. And when we start thinking about COVID, there's 3 things I'd like you to think about. One is, of course, COVID. You're trying to, you're at home probably with your family. You're working from home. You're not going into the office. You're doing more online. You're trying to avoid physical contact. Well, there's some great progress. COVID's essentially accelerating the transition to an AI and robotic economy. And there's some great material here. Robots in retail. There's and people worry that's going to take away some jobs in retail, but there's also telepresence robots. These are remotely operated by persons. So this could be adding jobs. You're at home, but you're controlling a remote control robot. And this is an interesting thought, robots at home, where you're reducing the need to have a job. Because think about, mowing the lawn, doing maintenance on the house, repairing plumbing, all the things you invite people into your house, which you don't want to do during the COVID period. But, robots, there's some great home robots that are starting to be developed, and this may actually reduce the need or the cost to have a job. So let's wrap it up, just talk a little bit about the benefits of artificial intelligence. Certainly you're going to have access to expertise, be able to make better choices. There's also some concerns about the risk, job loss, superintelligent. I don't really worry about those. I worry about de-skilling, over-reliance on AI, and bad actors, bad people using AI for mischief. Those are very real today. And I think there's certainly other technologies, augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain for security, advanced material and energy systems, and even life science research that may have a bigger impact on our lives, more than AI, improving our quality of life in the next 10 to 20 years. And service science, of course, has to study not just AI, but all of these different technologies and how it impacts quality of life. So we can think about, transportation, driverless vehicles, water, recycling like Singapore does, manufacturing coming back local because of robotics, 3D printing, energy solved due to artificial leaf, geothermal, small-scale nuclear, construction industry, the broad groups able to build a 30-story building in 15 days, and all kinds of advances coming in robotic recycling of buildings. I've mentioned how information and communication technology is going to be revolutionizing our ability to access, augment our own intelligence. Retail goes social, finance goes crowdfunded, healthcare, all robotic surgery, 3D printed organs. Imagine kids with smartphones and education actually making discoveries, working on teams, learning how to become entrepreneurial. And I know it's hard to believe, but even government works better in 20 years thanks to all of these advances. There's just a little bit on artificial leaf, food from air, which may impact the climate change issues, exoskeletons, something I certainly want as I get older. So there's a lot of areas of progress and technology, and I throw this slide in and the next slide just to show that, the field of artificial intelligence, was conceived in 1955. There was a proposal for the Dartmouth Conference. IBM was part of the team proposing this. 64 years ago, artificial intelligence got kicked off. And there's certainly coming smartphones that will be able to pass any entrance exam. Professor Arai is building the Todai robot in Japan. It can already do the Tokyo University entrance exam better than 70% of the students that take the Tokyo University entrance exam. So how long before you have that capability in your smartphone? And thinking of phones, I also was conceived in 1955. I'm 64 years old. And when I grew up in Maine, we had a wooden party line telephone on the wall. When I was at MIT, I had a rotary dial. When I got to Silicon Valley, I had my Nokia phone. Now, of course, I have my iPhone. What might I have by 2035? And if I'm lucky enough to make it to 2055, what might I have? It's clear these building blocks are getting better and better and better. My first program in 1972 on punch cards. And while I was leading IBM's global university programs, we gave 300,000 faculty and students around the world access to IBM's AI in the cloud, Watson in the cloud. So we think about building blocks, Legos. Now you can buy robot-controlled 3D printed Lego kits. So these building blocks are getting better. I certainly remember, my first program and how much better programming is today. But just think about how fast these building blocks are going to improve. Here's a picture in 2016. This was hard for AI systems to recognize. In fact, Microsoft Caption Bot on June 19, 2016, when I uploaded it, said it. I'm not really confident, but I think it's a couple of brown bears standing next to a cat. That's clearly wrong. But I sent it around. I gave Microsoft feedback. I gave them 0 stars, but they still got the data and what I thought it was. And the next day, of course, when I checked, I think it's a close-up of a cat looking at a dog. It's wrong, but it's getting better. IBM in 2016, we got it right, but kind of boring. Animal 100%, mammal 100%, dog 82%. But in 2017, when I uploaded the same image, I had to give Microsoft 5 stars because it said, I think it's a brown and white dog looking at the camera, which is exactly right. IBM, how did we do? Did you know it's a Welch Corgi? So remember what I said about superhuman performance? So our image recognition system is actually classifying things. Now think about the data that's going to be required to get to artificial and general intelligence. It's about 10 million minutes of experience to get to be an 18 to 20-year-old going through all of these different stages. But it's not just the data of the sounds and the images that you experience as you grow up. It's what's going on inside your body, how you feel when you do things, how the neurons are firing in your brain. All of that is data too, and we don't know how to capture that data. And so it's very hard to imagine how we're going to be able to build artificial intelligences like we are without something like GANs, generative adversarial networks, where we're doing massive amounts of simulation so that we both have access to the internal as well as the external stimulus. And once you get a functioning artificial general intelligence of about 18 to 20-year-old kind of comparable capabilities, it's about 2 million minutes of experience to become expert in any particular profession, whether it's flying a plane or being a medical technician or a dancer. So clearly, we're figuring this out little by little. There's about 2,000 jobs that make up the U.S. economy, everything from accountant to zoologist. If you zero in on one, like biochemical engineers who are trying to find better ways to create cancer-fighting molecules, you see they have to read, to stay up with the scientific and technical literature. But what if they only speak English? How do they read the progress in Chinese journals, German journals, Russian journals, all of Brazil, Portuguese, all of these different languages? Clearly, we need to have augmented intelligence to keep up with all this knowledge. And so this is an example of IBM partnering with some biochemical engineers at Baylor and helping them find the key insights in 60,000 publications worldwide around some proteins they were studying, and then they were able to improve their productivity in discovering cancer-fighting drugs. Here I just want to say that software is eating the world, open source is eating software, and models will eventually run the world, augmenting human performance and organizational performance. Best way to prepare: get a GitHub account. I can't go into a lot of details because of the time, but you don't have to be a programmer to download and use software from GitHub, and it's got everything there in terms of open source projects. So really, whether you're a programmer or not, get your GitHub account. It's the key to insight about the democratization of technology via open source. Again, I don't have time to go into this in great detail, but it's going to be very important to trust your AI. Has anybody tampered with it? Is it fair? Do we understand it? Is it accountable? And IBM is building trusted AI into our products. We are also, creating a vision of what trusted AI means, and we've contributed our open source, our trusted AI projects that came out of IBM research to the Linux Foundation. So they're, in true multi-vendor open governance in the Linux Foundation. Other companies, of course, Google has Lucid for explainability and Clever Hans for adversarial. So a lot of other companies are developing open source trusted AI techniques as well. But IBM is leading in terms of getting it into a foundation under vendor neutral open governance. And there's hundreds of open source AI and data projects, and you can go to the Linux Foundation AI to find out more about them. We also have a number of programs at IBM, competitions. You can win hundreds of thousands of dollars in this annual competition that we do with the UN, and lots of opportunities to learn about open source trusted artificial intelligence. And CODE, the Center for Open Data and AI Technologies that I lead at IBM, also has all kinds of ways to get involved in building open source artificial intelligence. So in conclusion, I'll just say there's all these platforms out there. AI is very hard. It's going to take decades to solve. You can read, review, and report all of the different, these are the skills to have in the 21st century that you can learn, to be a better T-shaped, adaptive innovator from a service science perspective. and better at using all of these democratized technologies that are in open source. And we have a variety of on-ramps to these things as well. And really, I think the thing that connects artificial intelligence to service science so well is trust. You can't have value co-creation without trust, and you certainly don't want to use AI systems that you don't trust. So trust is really a key abstraction that connects service science and AI. And I have to say, from a service science perspective, we want to build resilient systems because bad things are going to happen, and we have to start thinking about the knowledge to rapidly rebuild from scratch if certain bad things happen. And with that, I'll just say, after the pandemic, come visit me at the Almaden Research Center in San Jose, California, and I'll stop here and see if there's questions. Thanks again for the opportunity to present to you today, and wish I could be there in person, but I'm glad we're doing this virtually. Bye for now.